السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. معكم دكتور محمد نصر الدين، مدرس البايوكيمستري، كلية الصيدلة جامعة المنصورة. معكم النهاردة في توبيك بعنوان التريس مينرالز كجزء من مقرر النيوتريشن الخاص بطلبة المستوى الرابع في كلية الصيدلة. All minerals are considered as essential nutrients, but only required in small quantities. Minerals are classified according to the dose in which the human body require into macrominerals and microminerals. Macrominerals are required in a dose higher than 100 milligram per day, such as calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, sulfur, sodium, potassium, and chlorine. On the other hand, microminerals, also named as trace elements, are required in a dose less than 100 milligram per day. They include iron, zinc, copper, iodine, selenium, fluoride, chromium, and manganese. Trace minerals are found in both plants and animals. One of the most important topics when we are speaking about trace minerals is their bioavailability. Means how much of the mineral will be absorbed. And bioavailability of the trace minerals depends on two factors. Number one, the food source, whether it's from the plant or from the animal source. Usually, bioavailability is lower from plant sources compared to animal sources. Number two, the second factor in which bioavailability depends is the refining degree. The more refined food is lower in its content of trace minerals. Now we will speak about each of the trace minerals in detail. Number one is iron. Iron is found in all the cells of the human body. That's why the total amount of iron in the human body is somehow great compared to other trace minerals, around 5 grams. Amount of iron in your body is critical because iron deficiencies are very common, and on the other hand, too much iron can be toxic. Iron, as all of you might know, is present in two oxidation statuses, the ferrous and the ferric. And the ferrous status is more readily absorbed than the ferric status. That's why vitamin C and other organic acid increase the absorption of iron because they reduce the ferric into ferrous status. The bioavailability of the iron, which means how much is absorbed from iron, depends on the source of iron. Iron coming from plant foods is usually not attached to heme proteins and is usually called non-heme iron. On the other hand, iron coming from animal foods is usually attached to proteins called heme proteins and referred to as heme iron. However, usually in the animal foods contain also some percentage of the non-heme iron. So to summarize, animal meat is a combination of heme and non-heme iron, while plant foods, dairy products, and eggs contain the non-heme iron only. The bioavailability of the heme iron is higher than the non-heme iron. Heme iron is typically absorbed at a rate of 7 to 35%, while the non-heme iron is absorbed at a rate of only 2 to 20%. This means that the iron coming from animal source has a higher bioavailability than that coming from the plant source because, as I mentioned before, animal meat contains mostly heme iron and only small portion of the non-heme iron, while the plant, the dairy, and eggs contain only non-heme iron. Now we will speak about the iron story from the moment it's absorbed, then transported, and then its fate in the human body. Once The iron is inside the intestinal cells. The iron is bound to a protein called ferritin. Usually, iron bound to the ferritin is less likely to move out of the intestinal cells into the bloodstream, and the body makes use of this to control the iron levels, meaning that if the iron stores are low, little ferritin is produced to give chance for more iron to pass to the bloodstream. And on the other hand, if the iron stores are high, more ferritin is produced because the body does not need much iron at this state. Now the iron is in the bloodstream. The iron is transported in the bloodstream bound to a transporter protein called transferrin, which carries the iron to its fate to either of the three places, either to the liver for storage, or carrying iron to the muscle to make myoglobin, or to the bone marrow for synthesis of hemoglobin. So what are the functions of the iron in the human body? First, as I mentioned earlier, it's used for the synthesis of hemoglobin, which is important for transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. It's important for synthesis of myoglobin, which is used to transport oxygen and carbon dioxide in the muscles. Also, iron is important for the proper functioning of the immune system, important for cognitive development, for temperature regulation, and for energy metabolism. I have mentioned before that iron amount in the human body is critical because iron deficiencies are very common and too much iron can be toxic. So what is the recommended daily allowance for iron? It's different from male to the female. In males, the recommended daily allowance is 8 milligram per day, and the same for women over 50 years old, while for women of aged 11 to 50 years old, the recommended daily allowance is much higher. It's 18 milligram per day, and this is of course because of the chronic loss of blood. How about which food is rich in iron? Many foods are rich in iron like spinach, liver, peas, legumes, and beef. However, as I mentioned earlier, only animal products have higher bioavailability of iron. The iron deficiency causes iron deficiency anemia. Most common symptoms for it is a lack of energy and loss of mental concentration. The group which is least likely to have a deficiency of iron is usually adult males who eat meat regularly. So what about too much iron? Iron toxicity um, uh, can be harmful because iron will lead to the formation of free radical, which inactivate many enzymes and interferes with normal cell functions. Iron toxicity can be caused by frequent blood transfusions, intake of too many iron supplements, and also some genetic disorders like hemochromatosis. Now we move to the second in our list of trace elements, which is zinc. We will first talk briefly about its absorption. Zinc is absorbed in the small intestine. Zinc is similar to iron in many aspects. The absorption and transport processes of zinc are similar to those of iron, but it uses different proteins. Also, like iron, the zinc has a greater bioavailability from animal sources compared to plant sources. The absorption of zinc is interfered by high calcium levels and also phytic acid and also some proteins in milk. All these, either high calcium level or phytic acid and milk proteins, can decrease zinc absorption. Now we will talk about functions of zinc. Zinc is a cofactor for numerous enzymes. Also, zinc is needed for many uh, processes. It's important for DNA and RNA synthesis. It's important for alcohol metabolism. It's important for normal growth and development. Also, zinc is important for the normal and proper antioxidant activity in the human body because it acts as a cofactor for one of the most important enzymes involved in the built-in antioxidant mechanism in the human body, which is superoxide dismutase. Zinc is important for cell membrane structure. Also, zinc is involved in the regulation of transcription. You know that for synthesis of protein we have two main processes, the transcription and translation. Transcription is transferring of the DNA code into messenger RNA, and then the translation, the transfer of the nitrogenous bases code from the mRNA into amino acid coding in the protein. The process of transcription is regulated by a class of proteins called zinc finger proteins, which require zinc for their proper function. That's why zinc is important for the regulation of transcription. So how about the recommended daily allowance for zinc? Similar to iron, also the recommended daily allowance for zinc is different from male to the female. In males, the recommended daily allowance is 11 milligram per day, while in female it's lower, it's 8 milligram per day. Foods which are usually rich in zinc are animal foods like like beef, red meat, and shellfish, and also it's present in the oyster, the wheat germ, the crab, the shrimp, the beef, the pork, the liver, turkey, and legumes. How about zinc deficiencies? Um, the zinc deficiency is not apparent. There are no really severe symptoms unless the deficiency is really severe. Severe deficiency causes severe diarrhea, poor cross, impaired vitamin A function, and higher risk of pneumonia. How about the zinc toxicity? High levels of zinc will prevent the absorption of copper, and it will decrease the level of high density lipoprotein cholesterol, which is a good lipoprotein. Over 100 milligram per day dosing of zinc will cause diarrhea, cramps, vomiting, nausea, and depressed immune system function. Now we move to a new trace element, which is copper. I will just highlight some of the points in the pharmacokinetics of copper. Copper is transported and stored in two places, two organs in the human body, the liver and the kidneys. If you remember, I mentioned that iron is stored only in the liver. Iron is transported in the bloodstream, bound to a protein called ceruloplasmin. If you remember, I mentioned earlier that iron is transported bound to a protein called transferrin. Also, something characteristic for the copper is that excess copper is excreted in the bile. So, what are the functions of copper? Number one, copper is important for the iron transport from the liver to the tissues because it helps the iron to bind to the transferrin, which I mentioned before that it's the transporter protein of iron in the bloodstream. Also, copper is important for the proper functioning of the superoxide dismutase, which I mentioned earlier that it's one of the most important enzymes of the built-in antioxidant mechanism in the human body. And similar to this function, I mentioned before that zinc also is important for superoxide dismutase function. Copper is important for the proper functioning of cytochrome C for the immune system function, and also important for the formation of proper cross-linking in collagen and elastin. Regarding the recommended daily allowance of copper, it's the same for males and females. It's 0.9 milligram per day. If you remember, I mentioned before that the recommended daily allowance in iron and zinc was different from male to the female. For the iron, the RDA or the recommended daily allowance was higher in females than males, and the reverse for zinc, the recommended daily allowance of zinc is higher for the males compared to the females. But in copper, the RDA is the same for both, it's 0.9 milligram per day. Which food is rich in copper? Copper is present in liver, seafood, cocoa, mushrooms, legumes, nuts, seeds, and whole grains. Copper deficiency usually takes place by high doses of zinc supplementation and leads to symptoms similar to iron deficiency anemia. On the other hand, the copper toxicity takes place by dosing higher than 10 mg per day, and it's usually caused by Wilson's disease, which is a genetic disorder leading to copper accumulation in the brain, the cornea, the liver, and the kidneys, which I mentioned before. They are the main places for storage of copper. Now we will speak about a very famous one of the trace minerals, which is selenium. Selenium is usually present in two forms, either inorganic or organic. The inorganic forms of selenium are selenate and selenite, while the organic forms are selenomethionine and selenocysteine, and both forms can be good data resources of selenium. Selenium is usually stored at the skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles are the major uh, sites for selenium storage, accounting for approximately 28 to 46 percentage of the total selenium pool. So to summarize, the iron is usually stored in the liver, the copper is usually stored in the liver and the kidneys, while selenium is usually stored at the skeletal muscles. How about the functions of selenium? Selenium is important for the proper functioning of the antioxidant enzymes, most important the glutathione peroxidase, another member of the antioxidant enzymes which constitute the built-in antioxidant mechanism of the human body. Also, selenium is important for the synthesis of the thyroid hormones. Regarding the recommended daily allowance of selenium, it's the same for males and females. It's 55 microgram per day. You can recognize here that the needed amount is really small compared to iron, zinc, or copper. Which food is rich in selenium? Selenium is present in really high amount in tuna, whole wheat bread, grains, eggs, beef, and chicken. So keep in mind that the darker the color of the bread, the healthier it will be. Now we will talk about iodide as one of the trace minerals. Please keep in mind that iodine is very poisonous. It might be used in skin formulations for sanitization, but intake of iodine is very poisonous, while on the other hand, iodide is needed for proper health of the human body. For the regarding pharmacokinetics of iodide, it's absorbed and then stored mostly in the thyroid gland, where it's used for the synthesis of the thyroid gland hormones, the T3 or triiodothyronine, and the T4 or the thyroxine, and then excreted in the urine. The recommended daily allowance of iodide is 150 micrograms per day. Iodide is present in seafood and iodized salts. I have to mention that some raw vegetables like cabbage and broccoli might cause goiter, which is a disorder of the function of the thyroid gland, because they contain compounds called goitrogens. Goitrogen meaning they cause goiter, because these compounds disrupt the production of the thyroid hormones by interfering with iodide uptake in the thyroid gland. Now we move to a new trace mineral, which is fluoride. Fluoride is absorbed through the stomach. Fluoride mostly comes from the drinking water. Usually 1 cup of the drinking water contains 0.2 milligram of fluoride. Also, fluoride is present in seafood and seaweeds. Fluoride toxicity is really rare because the upper limit is high, it's around 6 milligram per day. So fluoride toxicity takes place usually in infants who get too much fluoride from toothpaste. Now we will speak about chromium. For the chromium pharmacokinetics, it has very low bioavailability, usually only small amounts, around 2 to 10 percentage of the chromium is absorbed. Chromium is carried in the bloodstream by the same transporter protein of iron transferrin. Chromium is stored in bone and also similar to copper and iron stored in liver, and similar to copper it's stored in kidneys. Most important function of chromium is that it's needed for the maintenance of the proper glucose uptake into the cells because apparently it increases the receptor activity GLUT4. So deficiency of chromium causes impaired glucose tolerance and also causes elevation in the low density lipoprotein and triglycerides. Chromium is found in many foods, however, processed meats, liver, whole wheat, eggs, mushrooms, broccoli, nuts, and legumes have the highest content of chromium. The last in our list is manganese. Manganese acts as a cofactor for many enzymes, including those involved in carbohydrate metabolism and antioxidant pathways. Manganese is also involved in bone formation, and usually animals with low manganese diet show changes in brain function, bone formation, and reproductive problems. Now we have finalized our lecture today about the trace minerals. You should have an idea about what are the trace minerals. For each of them, you should know about the pharmacokinetics, the function, the recommended daily allowance, the deficiency, and the toxicity. I hope you have enjoyed our lecture and see you in next lecture. Thank you.